Okay, and we're live with another episode of the Focal Thought, and my guest today is Charan Singh Ajpu. How are you today, Charan?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, good. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I know, from Facebook is how we met. We did go to school together at some point at Humber College, so I know you're a percussionist, a musician, an instrumentalist. I also know you do some blogging as well. And
That's correct.
one of the posts on Facebook that you did that really caught my attention, and which is why I wanted to have you on this podcast, had to do with I believe 13 books that influenced yourself, and I imagine your life and your thinking. And I'm just quickly going to go through them. So this post is available through your Facebook, and it's the first one is Shambhala, the Sacred Path of the Warrior. Second one is the Prophet. Then the third one is the Wizard Within. Number four is the Path of the Yoga Sutras. Number five is Ritual Craft, creating rites for transformation and celebration. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, Kabbalah Magic, Cave and Cosmos, Shamanic Encounters with Another Reality. The Book of Destiny, Unlocking the Secrets of the Ancient Minds and the Prophecy of 2012. The Heart of Tantric Sex, a unique guide to love and sexual fulfillment. Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. And Coming to Light, contemporary translations of the native literatures of North America. So right away, I mean, I'm used to reading business books and comics and magazines and things like that, Guitar World. But when you have a list like this is something that's totally different from what's considered the normal reading. How did you get into this stuff, and what's the importance with all of these books with the centralized theme?
Um, all the books are quite different. I guess they draw all different influences, but they're all quite beautiful from their cultural roots, and they all have something to teach us, something that's universal, something that's within us all. So I guess essentially, those are 13 of many, but most of our history has been eliminated. Uh, I'm not sure if you're aware of the stories, but essentially, I don't know what the percentage is. I think like 80% of all history has been eliminated, let's say through books. So of the surviving books, it's books like these that really show the revival and the preservation of cultural history and practices that are, absolutely mesmerizing and astonishing and is inspiring in every way.
So when you say, and again, when I say all of these have sort of some sort of central theme, I guess what I'm getting to is spirituality. Um, when you say our history has been eliminated, where are you coming
Uh-huh.
from? Which part of our history has been eliminated?
Uh, so if we take a look at the uh, the Library of Alexander, or let's say the Mesoamerican cultures um, during uh, this Spanish invasion, a lot of the books were burned and eliminated. So through the uprising of what is known as today as modern religions, most of the ancestral practices that came before those religions, their practices were destroyed uh, via books and other forms. So you see a lot of archaeologists, you see a lot of anthropologists, even journalists, really bringing back a lot of this history. And so some of these books are a reflection of that through their pathways and channels and portals of opening and awakening things that we all have within us that our ancestors left for us.
And when you say ancestors, which ancestors are you specifically referring to?
I mean, we are all indigenous, we're all native peoples. Our bloodlines all go back to beautiful cultures. And so all of our history is very beautiful. So when we try to draw it as far back as we can, we go to these roots of mythological tales and these mythological stories are they're universal because each person that listens to it draws different words out of these stories. We all hear something different, just like when we see a painting, we all see something different. And so that interpretation of life gives us the interpretation of experiences through truth.
Okay. And I don't know much about it, but from what I've read and researched about shamans, I believe that the word shaman is someone who knows. A lot of the things we're trying to maybe understand today, and again, I'm keeping it sort of within the spiritual aspect because there is the mind part of it, there's the body part of it, and then there's also the spirit side of it. And it seems that these indigenous cultures way back in this early history were already attuned into their spiritual self, right?
Precisely. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Yes. I mean, a shaman is just one of many words. A wizard is derived from wis, which is wisdom. A druid is derived from one who knows the oak tree. A shaman is another word for a priest, and a priest was used before modern religion, and it was known as a sage, yeah. A wise person. Yeah. In the Mayan culture, it would be a day keeper.
Okay. And if you were to go back and study this history, how is it that they were able to know these truths, or know sort of the spiritual essence of what is going on by going within? I know there's some things of getting into altered states, and that sort of being the portal into the other side. Is that sort of the same concept?
Yeah, I mean, each culture has their own practices, but essentially um, they all use different methods to reach enlightenment or ecstasy or any of these higher states of consciousness. So I think they did that through a combination of physical actions, mental thought, and spiritual attunement. And they integrated these things through ritual and through ceremony, some through plant medicine, some through other forms, and they all perfected these crafts, to the point where they could really transcend into really higher states of being.
And any idea where they might have learned this from? Did it come by accident through maybe meditation, or because we're sort of looking to them as our ancestors? Who might they
Yes.
have been looking to, or where did they get this from?
Well, there's different theories on that. One theory that anthropologists and archaeologists seem to return to often, especially these days, is Atlantis, the Atlantean civilization that broke off during a flood, or possibly a meteorite that struck the earth and created a flood. And so these Atlanteans spread to different parts of the world. And so everywhere you see pyramid structures, those civilizations were very advanced in everything from technology to agriculture to mathematics to spiritual practices. And it is a possibility that all of these derive from Atlantis.
Okay. And do you think we're getting into sort of the origins of species, mainly humans, by sort of going there? Or?
Can you repeat that?
Sorry, do you think that we might be getting closer to the origin of species and how humans came about by sort of getting into Atlantis?
I believe that everything seems to repeat itself in terms of cycles. So if we look at the oldest form of science that we know, it is possibly or arguably considered astronomy. So whether we're looking at the stars or looking at the planets, we come up with cycles or mathematical calculations that repeat. We come up with equinoxes and solstice and things that affect us on a daily basis. When the sun rises, when the sun sets, it affects our our actions during the day, what we can do during the sun cycle, and our mental thought during the moon, how we connect with our dreams. And so I think our ancestors really, really mastered these connections with the earth, with the sky, and they unified and united both of them together. So I guess I see it as cycles within cycles. And just an example of that would be when you're in a fire ceremony with, let's say, for example, a Mayan priest, or we're going to call it a shaman. They have the ability to be in multiple dimensions at the same time. They could be in the physical third dimension that we know now. They can be in a higher state of consciousness, like connected to your dream world. Let's call that fourth dimension, and also other dimensions, all at the same time simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And that's without substances.
No, for sure. And that, once again, is accessing altered states, right?
Yeah, that could be, we can call that really connecting with the fire and speaking through spirits within the fire. And they also work with the fire. You could see the fire change shape. You could see animals coming out of the fire, spirits, lots of things. But to believe is definitely a placebo effect. So, if you have the placebo or the desire to want to believe in things greater than what we can understand, then many interesting things start to happen.
Correct. I mean, they say that, seeing is believing, but then believing is seeing too, right? To that effect.
Seeing is one thing, and experiencing is another. Yeah, the first time I saw a spirit enter a shaman's body, and his entire demeanor completely changed, and something was speaking through him, and we were just smoking tobacco and offering cacao to the fire, and nobody had discussed with me what was going to happen. It was we were just drumming during the ritual, and I saw him shaking like an exorcism was happening. I'm like, okay, this is pretty intense, And then when it was happening, like as he was, let's call it channeling an entity, I was trying to think of all of the ways that this could be like a setup or fake. I went through all my, like, what kind of David Copperfield kind of tricks is this guy pulling, But I couldn't figure it out. Like my mind was just completely mesmerized that it was a possibility that this was real. And the more I thought about it, the more I just wanted to know more and more and more. And so I tried to dig into books and go to rituals and ceremonies and just learn, just be a humble student of life.
So you actually saw a spirit enter this shaman's body?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that was just the beginning. That was just the beginning. When I started watching all of these fictional sci-fi movies, when I was a kid, I always loved, movies about the future or movies about, I don't know, things greater than what we can possibly perceive. I like expanding the mind consciously, and so when I started experiencing this for real life, that was it. There was no going back. It was, once you see something like that, it's kind of like you're turned on. You're ready to accept it. Little to nothing, and you're open to learning.
What did the spirit look like?
Well, the spirit entered the shaman's body, and what I perceive is that the shaman was speaking and working with the fire.
Okay.
And the fire seemed to move with the dialogue of his voice. This was many years ago, in the Appalachian Mountains, during a sacred fire community ceremony. And so I didn't physically see a spirit. I physically saw somebody looking like they were having an exorcism, and then their entire demeanor of voice and posture and character had completely changed, and they began to this entity began to speak through the body of the shaman. I have an article that I wrote. It hasn't come out yet, but I'm writing an article about this. And essentially, when I talked to the shaman the next day, he had no recollection of what occurred during the time that another entity possessed his body. He does not remember. He knows that he has the ability to do that, and he has a whole backstory of how it came about. But that's that was my introduction to this whole world of whatever you want to call it, this phenomenon.
No, for sure. So what you saw was basically the effect or the symptom of a spirit. It's akin to maybe if you see a tree branch moving because of the wind, you don't actually see the wind itself, but because that branch is swaying back and forth, there is a force of the wind hitting on it, right?
There's a lot of psychic mediums that can channel spirits, and they do it through different. They could do it through a form of meditation, and the spirit will start writing on a piece of paper. They can do it where the spirit starts talking through their body. There's a number of ways that you can do what they call channeling or spirit medium.
And what is
sure the technical terms?
What is your definition of a spirit, or how do you perceive a spirit to be?
I guess I don't know. I mean, look, anytime I think I know anything, I just learn something else, and it just makes me realize I know very little. But
sure. And again, I'm not asking as an absolute fact, just what your sense of it is. These things can change, right? For sure.
Yes, I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff that it's very, very difficult to explain in any words, regardless what language I would use. I mean, the only way to truly explain what I've experienced is through telepathy or you just experiencing the same thing. But yeah, essentially in words, I would say a spirit is an entity that exists beyond this dimension and is filtered down. So my best way of interpreting is an upside down pyramid. So the base of the pyramid would be facing up, and the tip of the pyramid would be down. Now, the tip of the pyramid would be representing consciousness. Consciousness would be 5% of our reality. The middle of the pyramid would be subconscious. That's 95% of our reality. And then the super consciousness is infinite. It just goes beyond what we can possibly even comprehend, unless we leave our body. And I've done that. So these spirits are coming down through the super consciousness into the subconscious, into the consciousness. So you can think of it as fragments of light. The fragments of light begin to be smaller and smaller as you get to the third dimension. So these spirits are coming from higher dimensions, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. I mean, one of the things I like to say, the proof is in the pudding. So just as, in accounting, I guess, math or numbers would be a reflection of what's happening in a business. If we open our eyes and, just look at the way the world is, it's too fantastical. I personally think, just to be, maybe random, that there is, some sort of intelligent design, some organization. And because of that, there are higher capacities that we haven't stumbled upon. There's a famous Qigong saying that says, the more you go outside, the more you discover. The more you go inside, the more you discover. There's always that, expanding infiniteness that's, happening. So, I mean, exactly. I personally haven't had, experiences, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this, but I do have some sort of a hunch that there are, higher capacities that, we might be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate when I was younger. I just seemed to stumble upon some people who, I don't know, just almost pushed me out of my shell, my comfort zone, and check this out, check that out. So, I mean, I started doing yoga at 18 years old. I've been doing yoga for about 23 years. And I remember, speaking with some friends when I was younger, and they were just into some pretty far out stuff. So it was kind of natural for me to check out, numerology, reflexology, gemology, channeling spirits, paranormal. That was kind of like an introduction. But what I really think is, our reality, our five senses represents 5%. That's 5%. So the 95% is our subconscious, which is why I believe, Buddhist monks and all of these spiritual gurus, even, all these books that are written, they say as you begin to discover the inner truths, the inner realities, that's the 95%. And that 95% is so profound, it literally changes your entire perception of reality, which is the 5%. So I almost feel like these ancestors were taking from the superconsciousness, going through the subconsciousness into the consciousness, which we know. So we know the 5%, our outer reality. That inner reality is like an untapped, unlimited, infinite source of wisdom, and it draws us to what we call spirits, or our spirit, or our soul, or all of the above.
That's an interesting point. So I think modern day, we're sort of starting with the conscious mind, with the senses, and then as an after fact, we maybe forcibly try to think of the subconscious. From what you're saying is, our ancestors, they actually were sort of maybe based in the subconscious and then got into the conscious form, with the senses. They weren't distracted. Do you think distractions has something to do with that, which is where that sort of flip has happened? And by
Well, the
distractions, I mean,
distractions,
off the senses, like lights and sounds and things like that.
yeah, but it's just temporary. It's just part of where humanity is now in their cycle of life. So, if we look at another 50 to 70 years, you could see that the consciousness of all the beings on the planet will continue to rise. So they'll continue to tap into more and more psychic abilities and become more and more unified, and to use more and more, telepathy and all of these incredible things. So we're just coming out of the dark ages right now. So we just have to be patient.
And is this something that is maybe evolutionarily wise happening, like automatically, or is this something we have to sort of, again, consciously, no pun intended, force ourselves to get towards?
I mean, you can approach it any way you want. Essentially, I think the most important thing is everybody has their own journey, and it's just really important for everyone to honor and respect and just continue to build their inner intuition, to be guided by their own voice, to be guided by their own um, uh, manifestations, and to walk in the direction of their heart. And when they do that, all these magical things happen, because you're not being influenced by these distractions outside of you. You're being influenced by all of these purities within, and those purities within will lead you to the path that is of your greatest will, of your greatest desires, of your greatest intentions. And I think that's what a lot of these teachers say in these books, in different words and languages, and probably way more poetically than I said it.
No. I mean, if you were to sort of maybe give some practical advice, so say we have a person, I mean, from someone like myself, I got into the jazz music as a young age, going to Humber, and I think jazz was sort of the gateway, for me to get into sort of, some of the spiritual aspects that I got into. But for,
Hmm.
someone who's growing up and, maybe never sort of got into the arts background at all, who's been caught up
Hmm.
with life, with work, with, maybe marriage, family, kids, etc., maybe caught up in the rat race. And
Hmm.
how would you suggest someone like that, getting in touch with their spiritual side? What would you advise or recommend as a first step?
I truly believe everybody knows what to do. I believe everybody knows what's best for them. And the more they start listening to themselves, um, they follow that. Everybody's trying to tell you what to do and how to do it. And, when you start to channel all that out and you just start listening to yourself, like, you're guided. And if you make mistakes, that's, you needed to learn those mistakes. They're part of your process. If you repeat cycles and you don't want to repeat them, you start to observe those cycles. So I really think everybody has this sacred path, or this route, and you can, yeah, it's infinite, man. You could channel it through anything, whether it's yoga or meditation or music or sacred sexuality. Like you could literally go as far as you want in anything. Um, you just have to, like, only you know what's best for you. That's what I believe.
I like that. I like that you say that there's different channels to to getting to this one place. When you say listen to
Yeah.
yourself, do you mean listen to the voice that's in your head, or sort of listen to
Well,
the knowing that's in yourself?
mm,
Because sometimes I feel I don't verbalize it in my head, but there's this sort of knowing, you know?
I mean, my experience is that the mind is very conflicted because the mind has been programmed by the outer realities of social systems and structures that I don't really believe serve humanity as a whole, or is not leading us to a proper direction. And so, I really believe that the experiences that we're going through as a whole are ways for us to break cycles that no longer serve us and to move in a direction that does serve us, serves everyone universally. So I guess another way of saying that would be no matter what you do, it serves greater humankind. Everything that you do has a benefit to your family, to you, to your brothers and sisters, to your neighbors, to your community, and finding what your purpose is. And I think that is from listening to your intuition. And a lot of practices come from helping you build your intuition so you know that it's your own voice and it's not a voice that's been programmed inside of you or coming from someone else.
I fully agree with you on that. I think that, and again, I always try to keep breaking my patterns. A good friend once told me, I'm the summation of the unconscious patterns that are, in that sort of cycle. And the best thing, like you're saying, is to listen to your own voice. Try to find your own intuition and let that be the guide, because that is specific to you. It's unique to you, right? It shouldn't be from mom or dad or your sports hero, musical hero, or because that's good
Mm-hmm.
for them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, can you imagine what all of these prophets and saints and sages and deities, if they had listened to everybody else and not gone on their own journey, we wouldn't have all of these stories and these legacies that are still here thousands of years later. I mean, they've left legacies behind from their actions, and that's inspiring. How can we do the same? How can we follow in those great footsteps? They're big shoes to fill, but wow, it's you wake up early in the morning just to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I could agree with you on that in the sense that you see that with the saints, from Saint Anthony to etc., who've been canonized and martyrs, and you can see
Mm-hmm.
that in personal growth coaches, Tony Robbins. I can't imagine a world without him. And even with
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs, with business people who've sort of followed their own voice. Maybe we can talk about Steve Jobs, who did his own thing rather than follow the masses. We wouldn't have the
Mm-hmm.
iPhone today, etc.
Yeah.
um what are you working on now? I mean, you've reached sort of like, I wouldn't say an advanced level, because like you said, you're always the humble student learning. What are you
We're always,
working
yeah.
on now and trying to sort of strive towards to in your spiritual growth?
That's a good question. I definitely think less is more. When we talk about being distracted, there's just so many things we're interested in. Oh man, I want to take cooking classes, or oh man, I want to do this and that, and there's just so many. It's infinite what there is to learn, and we want to learn everything. But the reality is there's just not enough time. That's what makes life so beautiful. So, you know what what do we really want to learn over all these options? Like, what can we live without? What can't we live without? So for me, it's always music. Music has always been my muse, and so I'm always exploring with music. These days, I've been participating in sacred plant medicine ceremonies and basically learning how to play these medicine songs with the shamans, or they call them taitas in Colombia, where I live, and yeah, and and listen to what the music sounds like when you're completely out of your body in some other dimension. When you come back into your body, you have a completely different perspective of I don't know what you just heard, which sounds nothing like the way it would normally. And the other things I've been working on is basically putting together different methods and conceptualizations of occult and esoteric studies to preserve and revive them and just share them with whoever wants to learn them. A lot of that is from the Mesoamerican cultures. So I've been studying a lot of the techniques of the Mayan priests who would basically activate in the highest chambers of the pyramids. They would practice these sequences called Kulkulkan, and they would activate the Koyopa, which is the internal lightning. And then they would use that, let's call it Kundalini or Prana or Chi or Ankh energy within to activate others or to connect deeper within themselves. So yeah, these are some of the things I've been working with.
And that's similar to, I guess, the the Shaolin monks, the chi that they use, right? That sort of lightning energy you're talking.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it's all the same. I mean, they all have different techniques to practice and different words and different ways of explaining, but I think they're all trying to, do the same thing, really.
All roads lead to Rome or back home, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
That's amazing. Listen, Charan, thank you very much for coming on this podcast. To be honest, like each one of those books you mentioned, we could do a separate podcast episode on because they're so very interesting and very eye-opening. I really wish you well in your journey, in your many journeys and in your simultaneous journeys at the same time, multi-dimensional, multi-species. And if someone wants to get a hold of you, maybe for some more information or just to see what you're sort of checking out, where's the best place for them to reach you?
They can email me or they can check out my WordPress website, which is just artistlovewizard.wordpress.com. So if they type in, or they can email me at artistlovewizard@protonmail.
At ProtonMail.
ProtonMail, yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. And I'll put those
mail from Switzerland.
Switzerland, okay. I wouldn't expect any less from you, living in Colombia and emailing from Switzerland.
No. I'm in Colombia.
I know.
The ProtonMail is just not Gmail.
I know. It was my crude joke.
Yeah.
But thanks again for coming on the podcast, and I'll put those in the show notes as well, so people can see that visually.
Thanks.
And thank you for a great conversation. And once again, I wish you well.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you.